You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast.
Impact is not charity, but it's a way to manage risk and to build for the long run. Africa produces raw commodities, but captures very little of the value. And in the meantime, unemployment is quite high and population is growing with youth population looking for jobs. As an investor coming from Switzerland or France, investing in Africa, I had to adjust my understanding of the needs and understanding of the issues and the solutions to bring. The future belongs to businesses which are rooted locally, but with this systemic thinking.
Stay tuned as we bring you inspiring people who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast with your host, Tessa Adamu.
Welcome to another episode of the Unlocking Africa podcast, where we explore the ideas, innovations, and strategies that are unlocking Africa's economic potential. Today's episode is all about agribusiness, food security, and patient capital. And I'm joined by someone who sits right at the intersection of philanthropy, investment, and real-world execution. Today's guest is Luc-Etienne Dandrieu, General Manager of AlphaSeeds, a philanthropic investment company supporting sustainable agribusiness SMEs across Africa. Luc brings over 20 years of experience across agriculture, food systems, sustainability, and operations. Today, we'll be discussing how capital can be deployed differently to build profitable businesses while strengthening local communities. Luc-Etienne, welcome to the Unlocking Africa podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for welcoming me there.
It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. As always, I like to start from the beginning, so I was hoping you could introduce yourself and give us a brief introduction into who Luc-Etienne is.
Yeah, well, you said most of it professionally, but I could say that I'm French and Swiss, living in Switzerland. I'm born in France, father of two, and I'm general manager of AlphaSeeds, as you said, food scientist and food lover. And I'm really happy to share a bit what we're doing with AlphaSeeds.
So we're here to discuss the great work that you're doing at AlphaSeeds. So to set the scene, what problem was AlphaSeeds created to solve, and why does agribusiness sit at the heart of your mission in Africa?
Well, AlphaSeeds was created to address, some issues in a sense. Indeed, Africa produces raw commodities, but captures very little of the value. And in the meantime, unemployment is quite high and population is growing with the youth population looking for jobs. And agribusiness sits at the heart of our mission because it tackles several challenges at once and can really help to create better jobs. And through local value addition, we can reduce exporting of raw materials and keep the value, keep the skills and income in country. So that's really what we have in our purpose.
So as you mentioned, a huge part of what you do is based around value, whether that's the value within communities, creating jobs. So that does require, or it has given you the opportunity to, as you describe, a philanthropic investment approach. So how does this hybrid model differ from traditional impact funds or development aid approaches that we tend to see?
We sit in between development aid and traditional impact investing, as both have limits. Indeed, development aid relies on grants, and often once the funding has stopped, the project are finished. On the other hand, traditional impact investors tend to be already too commercial for early stage African SMEs. So the founder of AlphaSeeds had in mind to be there to bridge this gap in between good intentions and viable businesses and finance entrepreneurs to create jobs, to really develop companies that have lasting impact.
You mentioned bridging the gap. I guess one gap that you are trying to bridge is the finance gap faced by agri-SMEs in sub-Saharan Africa. So from your experience, why has this gap proven so difficult to close?
The answer can be long in a sense, but I think that there is different thing. First, it's about risk and risk perception, risk or real risk also. There are some political instability, some challenges with infrastructure, some operational risks which have impact on cost, on volatility. So this doesn't help to get funding on one hand. On the other hand, you have a world of investors with apply Silicon Valley metrics to African SMEs, so which are not aligned to the context, not fitting what are the real needs. Because what I've seen so far, is there is not a lack of talented entrepreneurs, but there is the lack of patience and of capital which is adapted to the reality.
From reading about the work that you do, one thing that did interest me is you're very deliberate about where in the value chain you operate and not just how you invest. So you focus specifically on agro-processing rather than some of the primary agriculture. Why would you say the processing is such a critical leverage point for your work?
Well, how we understand the issue is that there is this unbalance in between exported raw material versus imported processed food. So we see agro-processing and processing as the leverage point. Indeed, that can give pricing power to farmers, that can reduce post-harvest losses. And also it is creating margins, and with margins you can create better jobs. So we don't transform an economy by exporting raw crops. However, that can be really important to do. But in the meantime, you need to create the value locally as a way to anchor supply chain and also to stabilize the farmer incomes.
I guess with that in mind, from what you've mentioned, the impact plus the profitability is very important for AlphaSeeds. So how do you balance that commercial discipline with some of the social and environmental outcomes that you hope to achieve?
We tend often to say that there is a competition in between impact and profit, or impact and the commercial sense. But I would like to ask the question, is it really impactful? Is it really making sense to do business if it stops once the money stops? There's profitability is key for impact, and impact is key for profitability on the long term. Impact is not charity, but it is good business. It's a way to manage risk and to build for the long run.
I agree. So I guess part of managing risk is also at the beginning point before you actually invest, trying to assess whether the companies or the investees have potential. So when you're assessing potential investees, what are the criteria that you look at? What are some of the non-negotiables?
So what we do at the stage of companies we invest in, actually we invest in people. The company itself, is somehow coming second, and first is really the person and the entrepreneurs. Hopefully, a good team around the person or persons. And really, we invest in the entrepreneurs, in the skills, in the track record he already has. And what is critical is to be aligned on the purpose. We believe, and as I was saying before, business and impact must go together, and it needs to be something that is at the heart of the business and at the entrepreneur we invest in. And in terms of personality or soft skills, there is a need to trust each other and to be able to learn from each other. We are learning a lot through the entrepreneurs we are working with, and hopefully they learn from us. But we need to have this trust and transparency in the process.
If we continue on the theme of investees, I know capital is obviously important, but one thing that stands out is you have a very hands-on approach once you've invested. So why is patient hands-on capital often more effective than larger short-term investments from your experience?
Because building a business takes time, actually. We invest in young companies, and it takes time to structure, to build the foundations. because if you scale too fast, then you might just collapse. I mean, there is a need to have the time to build trust, to develop the skills of the entrepreneurs. And one of the key aspects being on cash and working capital management. And it takes some maturity and the refinement of the business model and of the skills of the teams leading the business.
You touched on some important areas there in terms of building trust and the skills. Mm-hmm. So can you walk us through how AlphaSeeds supports companies beyond capital, particularly in areas like operations, processing and supply chain?
So we are not passive investors. We are not there to control every steps or everything that the entrepreneur is doing. Of course, we are there to support. We are there to be there, with care, with empathy also, because the entrepreneurs are the one leading the job and doing the heavy lifting on the ground. So we are not there to give lessons. We don't bring a manual. We are there to roll up our sleeves and bring our experience, our network, and tailor the support we give to the entrepreneurs. When we do investment, we build a value creation plan with the entrepreneur. We identify where are the needs. Being technical, being soft skills also, and we find the right resources to support the business, to support the entrepreneur.
So if we look at the companies that you work with, how many have you invested in so far in Africa?
Yeah, we are still pretty early in our journey. We invested in 3 companies so far, one in DRC, one in Senegal, and one in Tanzania.
Great. So from your experience working with these companies, what are some of the biggest execution risks agribusinesses face on the continent?
Well, there are different ones, but if we talk about the businesses or how they manage, the main challenge is not only linked to Africa, something that you can find in other places, but cash and working capital management is often, what is the issue? I often say that cash is oxygen, it's similar to oxygen. If you don't have it, you die. A business die. Many businesses are dying not because they lack profit, but they die because they lack of cash. So that's one of the critical aspects that we focus on with the entrepreneurs, and we've seen that it's not that easy. Also linked to the seasonality, which is often a challenge. And also when we talk about agribusinesses in Africa, you often buy from smaller farmers and you buy in cash direct while you sell to retail. And there you might be paid at 30, 60, 90 days. And then, the working capital is the challenge.
So if we can look at some of the real-life examples from the work that you're doing on the ground, what are some of the common misconceptions about African agribusiness you encounter most often?
One of the bias I had at the beginning, and I'm learning from with time, is often, we have our European or Occidental lenses and linked to sustainability and the way we see agribusiness or the sectors where, or the way to do business or the way to produce food. And we often don't, I was not contextualizing enough my understanding of the needs, my understanding of the dynamics. And so that's one of the challenges I see. As an investor coming from Switzerland or France, investing in Africa, I had to adjust my understanding of the needs and understanding of the issues and challenge and solutions to bring.
So I guess looking at your portfolio, you work within some interesting commodities such as palm oil or locally produced agri-inputs, which do challenge some common narratives. Mm-hmm. Palm oil is often portrayed negatively in global debates. From AlphaSeeds' work on the ground, how can palm oil be part of a more sustainable solution rather than what is sometimes perceived as a problem?
It's a bit what I wanted to say just before. Context matters. Context is key. If we talk specifically about palm oil, these trees are just a gift for humanity in a sense. The yields with palm oil are 4 times at least or bigger than any other vegetable oil. So it's just impressive how much you can produce, but the way you do it is critical. So the problem is not palm trees as such, but it's deforestation. It's when you destroy biodiversity to do only palm and produce only that. So that's the key issue. And when you think about Europe or US, we should not eat that much palm oil. It's not part of our standard or diet. And it's linked to really highly processed food and probably not what we should do. But if you look at DRC or West Central Africa, red palm oil is part of the traditional daily diet. And having or producing red or unrefined oil in a good way, sustainably there without deforestation makes a lot of sense. It's really part of the life and part of the diet.
You mentioned the deforestation element of palm oil. So climate resilience is becoming unavoidable in agriculture. So how are you seeing climate risks affect investees, and what practical adaptations actually work at the SME level?
Climate resilience and climate adaptation is something that is critical in Africa, but worldwide indeed. What we see and start to see means an impact on yields or logistics. The rain patterns are less predictable than they used to be. For example, we see that now in Congo, in our palm oil project, where there is much less rain currently, while it should be raining more and we should be planting trees, and it should be the right time for that. And currently, we don't know if we will manage or when we'll manage to plant the trees. So there are already, real practical impacts. Is there a great solution for all of these and things that can really manage or mitigate this risk? I am not sure. However, what I see and more, and I think that there's a lot of things to learn from that and use, is about regenerative agriculture practices. Maybe there's a lack of definition about that, but still there are interesting and meaningful practices that are promising being in Africa or globally, with health of the soil and the way to produce food that is resilient. And it's really, it's an absolute need. And it's a change of mindset, trying to work with nature and stop to work against nature or just to impose our own will on nature. So there is this mindset change which is already starting and coming, and it needs to accelerate because we will have significant impact from the climate change on the food production.
If you look at climate resilience, climate impact, and also other ways that you're measuring impact, how do you measure impact in a way that goes beyond tick box, say, ESG metrics, and actually reflects improvements in the livelihood and the food security of those communities that you're working within?
Yeah, well, for impact measurement, we are still, as I was saying before, we are still a small and young organization. So we prioritize doing and learning over reporting at that stage, trying to stay simple and pragmatic. So we measure, of course, the number of jobs we create, the impact on farmers, we integrate the trees planted when it's relevant, the improvement on nutrition, but we try to keep it simple with having in mind that if it improves daily life, then it counts and it is what matters.
In terms of the improving daily lives, I know that your approach, it kind of goes beyond individual businesses. You prioritize neglected regions rather than obvious investment hotspots. So why is this important, and what opportunities do you think are often overlooked?
So, regarding the neglected regions aspect, as impact investors, we really want to be impact investors. Or if you go to the doctors, their role is to help people who are sick to get better. I think impact investors have somehow been the same role for economies. So to go where there is issues and take some risk. And also, there's some risk, of course, but some reward in terms of business that you can really help to grow and impact and communities that are having better livelihoods afterwards.
Thank you for sharing that. So if we zoom out slightly and talk about what this means for entrepreneurs and investors listening today, I know many African entrepreneurs struggle to become investment ready. So what practical steps do you believe founders can take to attract that patient capital like yours?
Mm-hmm. For me, becoming investment ready is critical indeed. I've seen quite a few entrepreneurs, and often it was a bit of a challenge because the main thing about being investment ready is to speak the same language, so to be able to understand each other. And something that I believe is that capital follows clarity. So if you have a clear business model and you are able to explain it in a clear way, speaking the same language to investors, that will really, a key step. How to do that? I've seen a few entrepreneurs coming from the investment world in their previous life. And so it makes things easier. If you don't have an MBA or if you didn't do investment before, what I would suggest, you can find quite a lot of incubators, accelerators, advisors that can really help you to refine first your business model, but then to explain it properly. So that's one thing. The other thing is to talk and to network with other entrepreneurs who already managed to raise capital and they can share their experience and mentor. There are quite a few entrepreneurs that are happy to help others. And then talk to investors as early as you can. Maybe not already with an ask, but already just network, talk, explain, understand what are the expectations from investors.
So with this in mind, if, say, for instance, more philanthropic capital adopted an investment-driven approach like AlphaSeeds, what systematic changes do you believe we could expect across Africa's food systems?
The thing is, for decades, there was quite a lot of donations without significant transformation happening. What we say is that, Africa does not need more donations. Africa needs more investments. And these investments are a way to create better jobs in food systems. And this can have different impacts. The one is, of course, food security, which improves in terms of affordability, convenience of nutritious food on one side. And on the other one, there's more stable incomes. And also something which I believe is quite important is to have agribusiness being seen as an opportunity by youth rather than the last resort, something that people don't want to do. So, I think philanthropic capital can have a really strong impact in that sense, in that direction.
So if we zoom out slightly and talk about what this means for entrepreneurs and investors listening today, but also kind of look at the future, what type of business models do you believe will drive the next phase of growth in the next 10 years, specifically in that kind of entrepreneurial and investment ecosystem?
What I believe is, there might be some fancy things like drones or things, maybe, but I believe more in some down-to-earth business models solving real concrete issues. And probably not one problem, but a few, because you need to integrate enablers in the business model. What I mean by that is integrate farmers and train farmers. These can be linked also to some blended finance, for example, using grants for this and catalyzing some finance going or some support going to the farmers. That's one thing. Or it could be some hybrid models combining some processing and services, or this kind of systemic approach. Like the future belongs to businesses which are rooted locally, but with this systemic thinking.
So if we look closer to home, in the next phase of growth, what specific role do you see AlphaSeeds playing in shaping more resilient and inclusive agribusiness ecosystems?
Well, we don't aim to be Nestle or the next big multinational. What we really want is to prove that impact and business can coexist, even, are needed to each other, actually. And that through investment, we can really do and create a lasting change. That's really what we want to do. And we hope that we will catalyze, we will inspire. And success for us is if others are copying us and willing to invest and take risks with agribusinesses in Africa.
Fantastic. Last question.
Quote of the week.
As people, we often have quotes, mantras, proverbs, or affirmations that keep us going when times are challenging or when times are good. Do you have one that you can share with us today?
May I share two?
Of course.
I see two. One, which I think is really important and relevant to what I said before, but is if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. I think collaboration is key and is really important, and being in difficult or good times. But as a person, and that's really important, as a team, but personally also what I have actually written on my desk in a little post-it, and I read it almost every day, but a proverb that we can find in the Bible, which says, "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." It's something that, I do my best, and I want to have a positive impact through the work I do and to be useful for others around me. But then I'm not the one who is deciding if it is really the impact that I will achieve. And also, I'm not the one multiplying the effect of the work I do.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Luc-Etienne. That has been a great conversation, a great way to end the conversation. I think today you shared some very practical insights in terms of how patient capital, local value creation, and also long-term thinking can genuinely transform Africa's agribusiness sector. So it's been a pleasure. Looking forward to seeing how AlphaSeeds progresses. I know it's early days, but you're doing some great work already. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for joining us today on the Unlocking Africa podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who has listened and stayed tuned to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, or tell a friend about it. You can also rate, review us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast. Thank you, and see you next week for the Unlocking Africa podcast.